Good evening, everyone. Those who all are here, already going live with us, and we have, as you all know, that we are playing a series of webinar, and we are going to have 10 webinar. And I started with the first webinar. I'm Dr. Ajay Bajaj, and the second webinar today is by Dr. Niharika Jain, and you can see her there. Hi, Dr. Niharika.
Hi, sir. Hi, everyone.
Well, Dr. Niharika, I'll give you a short introduction and then we'll proceed with the webinar. Okay. So, Dr. Niharika has done her master's in endodontics and she's from Jabalpur, that is Madhya Pradesh, and she's been very active in academics since 2001. She's presently associate professor in Triveni Dental College, Bilaspur, and she's been awarded as best paper for the best paper during her post graduation. So she has been Chamakta Sitara since her graduation days. And she's on editorial board of Journal of Lasers in Medical Sciences. And she's research collaborate to PhD research projects in FEM, MATLAB, and AFM in Indian Institute of Information Technology and Management, Jabalpur. Interesting, huh? Some of the terms even I don't understand. And she keeps telling me whenever we are discussing something on phone, I sometimes don't really understand all the things what she says. But she is doing quite a lot of research apart from dentistry. Of course, dentistry related, but quite a lot of research on metallurgy of instruments and a lot of other things. She has been a chairperson in 10th annual National Conference for Society of Oral by our Indian Academy of Conservative Dentistry and Endodontics. Quite a long CV she has. She's been nominated as Best Endodontist by FAMDED Awards, again Best Academician by FAMDED Awards, Best Dentist in Madhya Pradesh by Ministry of Health uh, and Worldwide Achievers. Of course, Best Papers in Vietnam. Then she's been lecturing internationally regularly, and she's awarded as Best Woman Researcher Award recently in Chennai. If you follow her, you must have seen the photographs of the same on Facebook and all. And she is consultant endodontist and Healthy Smile Dental Clinic and Orthodontic Center, which is Jabalpur. And Dr. Abhishek is an orthodontist, her husband, and Des is a NABH accredited dental clinic. There are very few dental clinics in India which are NABH accredited, as we all know. Okay, so long CV. I tried to make it concise, Chota, and and that's it. I think Niharika, I should not be wasting any time. Everybody is like eager to listen to you. You are live, and you can start with your introduction of your topic. All yours. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you so much for the elaborative CV introduction. And once again, Ajay sir, thank you so much. Thank you, entire team of GSK, for giving me a chance to speak out my thoughts on Axis opening. And I'm going to share my presentation with you now. So, friends, as mentioned, I am Dr. Niharika Jain and I am from Jabalpur. Today, I'm going to speak about access cavity preparations. You know why I chose the topic? Because I find this topic is very important for an endodontist or whenever you are practicing root canal. The simple reason being, if anything goes wrong in this particular step, then you are messed up with your entire endodontics. And there are different theories regarding the cavity preparation. So today I'm going to speak about different types of cavity preparations and how to do those cavity preparations. Now, as I mentioned, access is the most important phase of any root canal procedure. If you have messed with access, perhaps your entire endodontics goes wrong. So today in my presentation, I'm going to speak about these topics, about the goals of access cavity preparation, simple principles of access design, how to make access openings, and what is the pre-access analysis. What are the factors that you should see before starting your access opening? Then access preparation in anteriors and posteriors, different types of access cavity. I'm going to discuss the principles of modern access cavity, which includes your conservative, ultra conservative or ninja axis, and the recent topic which is guided axis cavity, and it is very close to my heart. So let's see the goals. First, why do we make axis openings? The first goal of axis opening is that to locate the canals, to uncover all the canals. Our axis should be such that you can see all the canals. If there are three canals, the axis cavity should be able, should help you to visualize all the canals. Second, the axis cavity should be designed in such a manner that you can biologically disinfect the tissues inside the canal if remaining. You can remove mechanically the entire content from the pulp chamber and the radicular canals. So the biomechanical removal of all the infected tissues, the debris, should be achievable by axis cavity. Then, as I mentioned, the axis cavity should help you to disinfect the remaining tooth structure. It should enhance and help you to do complete obturation, like you say, three-dimensional obturation. So, axis cavity should be designed in such a manner that you can obturate your radicular canals completely in all three dimensions. And you should seal the canals, which is known as post endodontic restoration or coronal sealing of the radicular canals. Now, there are some principles of axis opening, and these are universal principles. Whenever you're doing axis opening, you should adhere yourself to these principles. I'm going to talk about each of the principles in an elaborative manner. The first principle says that the axis cavity should be designed in such a manner that you are able to remove entire contents from the pulp chamber and the radicular canal. So the simple word is deroofing. And what is deroofing? Deroofing means complete removal of the pulp chamber roof. You can see in the first diagram there are arrows pointing to the amount of remaining roof of the pulp chamber. Now imagine if this roof remains, what is going to happen? Your pulp canal contents like your debris, calcified tissues, restorative materials can be blocked here, because of which there is still infection inside the canal. The tooth may be discolored after endodontics. Therefore, this roof complete must be completely removed. That is why we say de-roof the pulp chamber completely. That is the first step of endodontics. Second, endodontic axis cavity should be done in such a manner that you can easily visualize the canals present. It should give you a direct vision of the floor of the pulp chamber, because floor is very important. I'm going to discuss it in further slides. Then it should help you to remove all the pulp remnants. What you can see, you can remove only that particular thing. So the axis opening should help you to visualize the chamber floor easily, and of course locate all the canals. Now, next important thing, the axis should be designed in such a manner that it facilitates the introduction of the instruments inside the orifices. Now, if there is no caries involving the floor of the pulp chamber, or in those cases where the floor of the pulp chamber is absolutely intact, what do you see? This floor of the pulp chamber is convex. Because of this convexity, the nature actually helps us endodontists or dental surgeons to perform endodontics. Why? Because of this convexity, the instruments can easily glide inside the root canal. Second most important step is that the junction between the radicular canals and the coronal canal should absolutely be smooth. Because if there is a smooth transition, the root canal instruments can easily glide inside the root canal without being hindered by the surrounding dentinal wall. So this is a very, very important step. Next, the basis of axis opening. You do any type of axis opening, but the most important step is that the axis opening should provide a direct access, as direct as possible, to the apical one-third of the canal or the initial curvature of the canal. This is the principle of straight line axis. Let's see these cases. You can see this is a case of first premolar, canine. The root of the canine is distally curved. So in this case, the axis opening should help or should facilitate the introduction of your instrument into that curvature. Let's see this case. As I told you, straight line axis means a direct entry or straight entry to the initial curvature of the canal or to the apical one third. Now, in this case, straight line axis doesn't mean straight line entry to the apical one third. It means initial curvature of the canal. The red line shows you the initial curvature of the canal. So please do not try to enter the instruments directly to the apical one third. It's going to perforate or create a ledge. It's the principle should be straight line axis till the initial curvature of the canal. Like this. Once you have achieved this, instruments will automatically glide till the apical one third. Look at this. The next point for straight line axis is angulation. Study the angulation of the tooth. And according to angulation, decide your straight line axis. Something like this. Now, imagine this is a case. I have not removed the dentinal wall present here, dentinal interferences. So, what is going to happen when you place your 20 number instrument here? It's going to be obstructed by this particular lip of dentine, because of which more stresses will be here, and the chances of missing the canal is more. You may miss misshaping the outer surface of the canal. You may create high stresses on the instrument, and you may deform the apical foramina. Henceforth, this lip of dentine should be removed to achieve a straight line axis. This principle is very, very important. This principle is the basis of pre-flaring the orifices. Pre-flaring means you are using your instruments to enlarging the coronal one-third of the radicular canal or the orifices. We are not enlarging the middle one-third or apical one-third of the radicular canal. There are different methods to do coronal pre-flaring. Earlier, we used to use Gates gradient drill. Piezo reamers are being used by many people, but stop using piezo reamers for canal or orifice enlargement. Piezo reamers are not meant to enlarge the orifice. They are meant to remove gutta perca from the canals. Okay, so there is Gates gradient on one side. Then you have NITI instruments, NITI orifice openers these days, which are available. Different types of instruments are present. You have endoflares, SX, one flare. If you look at Gates gradient drill, there are six type of Gates gradient drill, and their sizes are according to their dimensions or diameter of the end part. Best advantage or why GGs are used: one, because they have a non-cutting end, so they do not cut the lateral surfaces of, they do not cut the end or at the end of the instrument. Second, these instruments are self-centering. But imagine these type of cases where the mesial canals are curved, the mesial roots are curved, and imagine you are placing your Gates gradient inside mesiobuccal or mesiolingual canal. What is going to happen? Your GG may create perforation or a strip perforation on the inner aspects of the mesial canals. This is a very common problem with Gates gradient. GGs are absolutely fine with maxillary anteriors, but they are very, very risky in mandibular anteriors. Trust me. Secondly, they are very risky in mesial roots of mandibular molars and buccal roots of maxillary molars. Why? Because, as I mentioned, they are very risky in cervical areas where they cause perforation, because the amount of dentine is very less at the inner wall of the canal. So they are very risky in very difficult anatomical areas where they may cause strip perforations and they cut through the furcation involvement. Even there are different studies, and studies have shown that rotary coronal pre-flaring instruments are better than Gates gradient drill. Gates gradient drills have found to induce cracks in the surrounding radicular dentine, but the amount of cracks are very, very insignificant if you use different orifice openers like ProTaper Universal, Endoflare, RevoS, and Hyflex. There are different types of orifice openers available in the market, and this is the one which I am commonly using in my practice. This is a new generation heat treated pre-flaring instrument. The best thing what I like about the instrument: first, it is heat treated. Second, the maximum diameter is only 1 millimeter, so it doesn't cut beyond that.
बोले ना
as I mentioned, if we do not remove straight line axis, you can miss shaping the canal, you can create anatomical perforations, and you can deform the apical foramina. So, on the other side, if you achieve straight line axis, it also helps you to remove unsupported tooth structure. Otherwise, what will happen if you do not remove unsupported tooth structure, the tooth may fracture in between your endodontic appointments. It gives you an enhanced instrument control whenever you are doing shaping inside the canal or irrigation or obturation. It gives you enhanced obturation, and it absolutely reduces the chances of procedural errors like apical transportation, zipping, and perforations. Now, this is a condition we commonly face in a routine practice. We do beautiful axis opening, we temporize the tooth and send the patient. By the next time patient comes, what do we see? We see our entire temporary is packed inside the uh, cavity. Now, again, if I'm going to remove this, it's going to waste another 5 to 10 minutes of my practice, of my time, to remove the entire temporary restoration from the canal. Why does it happen? It happens because the walls of the access opening are in such a manner that they create undercuts. Can you see here? They create undercuts. Now, because of this undercuts, whenever the patient bites, the temporary moves inside, it gets clogged inside the cavity. So, the next principle says that walls of the access cavity must be slightly flared. I am not saying that they are too much flared. Only if this is straight, they are slightly flared towards the occlusal surface in the shape of the funnel. This prevents your temporary restoration from going inside the tooth or from breaking during masticatory process. Look at this case. If my access opening has 4 walls, all my procedures are going to be good. Well, I can achieve a stable rubber dam placement, which also help me to achieve a good isolation. Now, everything endodontics is all about isolation. These days, I've been seeing all those funny blogs on Facebook and other social media sites where people talk about isolation during COVID and isolation during endodontics. Both are important. So to achieve good isolation, for good placement of rubber dam, our access opening should have 4 walls. So you should always do a pre-endodontic build-up, which can be done by different restorative materials. If the floor of the cavity is subgingival, please don't try composite resins to do pre-endodontic build-up. It's a very technique-sensitive procedure. In that case, you can either use your Sarcomas, or you can use your resin-based glass ionomer cement, or you can use your sandwich technique. But the best thing is to do gingivectomy or crown lengthening procedure where you have root caries, and then you can do your pre-endo build-up after placing your rubber dam. So coming back to the topic, if my axis has all the 4 walls, I can easily flood the pulp chamber with irrigating solution throughout my procedure. It's going to enhance the disinfection of the root canals also. And of course, I'm going to have a stable reference point for working length determination. And yes, interim restoration does not encroach the interdental papilla. I think most of you have seen in your practice that you do beautiful access opening, give a temporary restoration, and send the patient. Next time patient will come again, the pain has absolutely gone, the pulpal pain has gone, but you will see a pocket adjacent to that too. And if you closely look, what is the reason of pocket? Most of your temporary restoration from the proximal walls go and get embedded into the periodontal tissues, which is very traumatic for the patient. The pulpal pain has gone, but the periodontal pain has aggravated. Let's look at this case. Access opening should always have 4 walls, create 4 walls, and then do access opening. But there are certain cases where you can do the vice versa. I'll show you how. Now, this is a case of a 22-year-old female, and she came to me with her mother with the complaint of severe pain and swelling in the left lower mandibular region. The diagnosis was acute periradicular abscess, so we decided to do an emergency access opening and followed by non-surgical endodontic treatment. You can see here there was a swelling involving mucobuccal fold and a dental caries. Dental caries was present involving the distal surface of the tooth. So what we did emergency access opening and try to press the swelling. When we press the swelling with our thumbs, a lot of discharge was seen coming from the canal. You can see the purulent discharge was seen coming out from the distal canal, and blood was seen coming out from the mesial canals. So in this case, we did access opening. We placed rubber dam, did access opening, and then we did a pre-endo build. This was a preoperative case. These are the CBCT images, the sagittal sections and the 3D constructive views. And a calcium hydroxide dressing was given. The dressing was repeated at weekly, and that means the patient was given two dressings at a week's interval, and this was after 15 days. And this was obturation that was done after 15 days, and this is a 13 months follow up of the patient. So ideally, access opening should have four walls. Pre-endo build-up must be done. But in emergency cases, you can do the emergency access opening and then you can do pre-endo build-up. Now, next very important factor is conservation of the tooth structure. No matter you are doing straight, you are doing a minimal invasive access opening, or you are doing conservative, ultra conservative, ninja guided endodontics, the concept is same. Conserve the tooth structure as much as possible. There is a key article by Dr. Anil Kishan, and in his article, he says that the structure and composition of teeth is perfectly adapted to the functional demands of the mouth and are superior in comparison to any other artificial material. So, first of all, do not harm. Save as much as you can. This is the diagram which is taken from his other article. And if you want, you can WhatsApp me. I can share the article with you. And he says that there are different reasons of tooth fracture after endodontics. You know what is the most common reason why an endodontically treated tooth fails? The most common reason is vertical root fracture. And what is the most common reason of that vertical root fracture in endodontically treated tooth? Tooth structure loss. Tooth structure loss is one of the most common factor. So try to save as much as possible. Now let's see this case. The canals are located in the center, but access opening was done in a huge manner. Lot of tooth structure is damaged. Imagine how much extra tooth structure is damaged. In this case, access opening is done like this. Your actual location is here. So you're going to damage or you're going to remove more tooth structure to achieve a predictable access opening. So whenever you are planning for access opening, please see how much tooth structure can be saved. That's a very, very important factor. Now coming to pre-access analysis. Once we have seen the key principles, we keep the key principles in our mind. Now we are going to see how to make access open. How to, you should have a mental map of access opening before beginning the procedure. There are three methods by which you can do access opening. One, periodontal probing. Second, radiographs. And tools used to begin access cavity preparation. First, cemento enamel junction. You use a periodontal probe and check. Sorry, I'll show you here. Okay. You use a periodontal probe and check the location of CEJ. Most of the studies says that pulp chamber roof is at the level of the CEJ in both maxillary and mandibular molars. In premolars, the data is 96%. So imagine in most of the cases, the chamber of the pulp floor the roof of the pulp chamber coincides with CEJ. You can see here in mandibular molar, this is the CEJ, and roof of the pulp chamber coincides with CEJ. Even in maxillary molars, the roof of the pulp chamber coincides with CEJ. I repeat, this is a case in both maxillary and mandibular, premolars and molars. Nothing has to do with anteriors. So please do not look for CEJ in anteriors. Nothing has to do with anteriors. So coming again, now why is CEJ so important? CEJ is very important because it helps you to locate the canals. It helps you to understand the depth of penetration of your burr. It helps you to understand the width of your cavities. Let's see how. There are five laws. These laws were given by Kressner and Brenkow, and they used CEJ as standard guidelines to assess the number of canals, to assess the pulp chamber floor, to assess the location of the canals. Let's see how. The first law is law of centrality. Okay, and this law suggests that the pulp chamber is located at the level of your CEJ. The roof of the pulp chamber coincides with CEJ. Second law states that the pulp chamber is located within the confines. Okay, that means the outer wall of the tooth resembles the inner wall of the pulp chamber. In simple words, the outer outline of the tooth resembles the outer outline of the pulp canal. Got it? Red color is the outline of the tooth, and this is the outline of the pulp canal. So both coincides, okay, and it is located in the center with equal amount of dentine remaining on all the four sides. This is a case found in almost all the patients, but the scenario may change with aging, with restorations, and with caries. Now, as I mentioned, the outer bulge reflects the internal shape of the pulp canal. Let's see how. This is a case of premolar. This is our outer bulge. And look at the design of access cavity here. Yes. The shape of the pulp canal is taken by the outer shape of the tooth. Next important thing is law of color change. Floor of the chamber is darker in comparison to the walls. Okay, so when you are penetrating, you can see an area which has a different color than the walls. That is the floor of the pulp chamber. Please do not go beyond that. In the first diagram, which is of maxillary molar, you can see a different color, because and you cannot appreciate the dentinal map there. What is dentinal map? Dentinal map is made by developmental lines of fusion. You can see here in the mandibular case, mandibular opening, there is a dentinal map in the form of H, and all the orifices are located at the end of this dentinal map. So it's very important to locate the dentinal map, because once you have located the dentinal map, you can easily locate the orifices, and you can assess the number of orifices also. But coming back to the first picture of maxillary molar, the tooth is calcified, the chamber is calcified. So in this case, you cannot appreciate the dentinal map. If you have located the canal, that's it. Stop. Do not go beyond this point with your burr. If you want to see the dentinal map, first, it is very difficult because the chamber is covered by calcified tissue. Secondly, you should use ultrasonics. But once you have located all the canals, do not go beyond that. Otherwise, you may land yourself in trouble again. Now, next important law is law of symmetry. This law helps to find out the number of canals. I have seen a lot of students coming with, ma'am, I'm not with a query of not able to find the canals. Sometimes they find one canal in the distal, sometimes they find two canals in the distal root. In mandibular molars, they don't know how to assess the number of canals. This is a very, very simple law. This law says that pass line through the center of the tooth in a mesodistal direction. Now, the root canals are located at equidistant from this side, from this line. You pass a line, okay, bisecting that tooth into two equal halves in the mesodistal direction. Now, your orifices are located at each side. Now, in this case, if the canal is located below this line, that means there is only one orifice. If the canal is located off center from the line, that means there are two canals. So you can assess the number of canals by this law. See in premolars, you divide the tooth mesodistally into half, and if the canal is located on that line, that means one canal, one orifice. And if the orifice is located off center, that means there must be another orifice also, just in the opposite direction. This is a case of canine. If you pass a line, what you can see? The canal orifice is off center. It is not lying below the, line. So that means there are two canals. In this way, you can assess the number of canals. Let's see this case. This is a case of maxillary premolar, second premolar. And I started doing endodontics. What you can see a single orifice, but the orifice is off center. If this is the midline, then the orifice is located here. That means one orifice should be present here. Look at this. So you don't have to worry whether your distal root has two canals or one canal. You can use this law in your routine practice. Now coming to the law of symmetry 2. Now let's see what is that. In this law, if you pass a line bisecting the tooth mesiodistally into two halves, what you can see, your canals are located at a line perpendicular to this line. Okay? Exactly perpendicular to this line. Again, I am saying the laws of symmetry and orifice location may change with aging, restorations, and caries. Now, next, laws of orifice location. Where are the orifices located? The orifices are always located at the junction of the floor and the wall. Like this, at the junction of the pulpal floor and the wall. This is where your orifice is located. Please do not dig with your burr more deeply, otherwise, you may perforate the tooth. Now, coming to the next point of pre-access analysis, that is radiograph. I know my CEJ. I have located my CEJ. Now I have a mental map of the chamber. Now let's see radiograph, which is going to confirm my, CEJ probing findings. So by a radiograph, what you can assess? You can assess the angulation of the tooth. You can assess the status and location of the pulp. Where is your pulp chamber located? Whether it's in the center, mesially, distally, whether it's calcified or it's patent. You can also assess the cusp tip to pulp chamber to furcation distance. Let's see how. First point, let's study angulations. Now, this is a case, your mandibular 8, which is mesially inclined. Okay? Let's see. Now, in this case, we are following a straight line axis universally. Now, if I'm going to use my burr in this direction, in a straight direction, what am I going to do? I'm going to perforate the tooth. Secondly, let me go more easily. I'm putting my burr, going deep, 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 boom, and I've perforated the tooth again. So, by radiograph, I can study the angulation of the tooth, because or following which I can change the angulation of the burr also. So I can change the angulation of the burr used to create a straight line axis and penetrate. In this case, this is a radiograph of mandibular 6 and 7. Both have different angulations. So the direction of initial entry by burr will be different. So this is the use of radiograph for angulation. Second, By radiograph, you can study the morphology of the pulp chamber and the radicular canals, like the location of the pulp chamber, as I mentioned, the size of the pulp chamber, the width, the length, the morphology of the pulp chamber and the radicular canals, and the number of root canals, of course. Let's see this case. Now I know that I have to confine myself when I'm doing access cavity within this part and these two proximal margins. Okay, so my access cavity will be here, like this. Other thing what the radiograph tells us is the amount of calcification present in the pulp chamber. Studies suggest that with aging, there is always a reduction in the width of the pulp chamber and the width of the pulp chamber. Even the size of the radicular pulp width decreases because of increase in radicular dentine. So you have to take in consideration when you're doing access openings in young patients and in older age group. Okay, that is why radiographs are very important. You can see the first radiograph is of a 23-year-old person, whereas the second one is of 60-year-old person with a previous restoration. The pulp chamber is completely calcified. Now, the strategy of access will be different. There are cases where there is calcification in upper incisor. In this case, a CBCT has been taken. I am going to tell you that please do not trust your radiograph. That's one point always, because radiographs are a two-dimensional view and CBCT is a three-dimensional. But but there is a statement passed by American Association of Oral and Maxillofacial Radiologists and American Association of Endodontists that CBCT should not be considered as a golden imaging procedure in all the cases. It should be done where the diagnosis is not clear or where there is traumatic injury to the tooth. There are guidelines. CBCT should not be used in routine endodontic practice. Please keep in mind that. Coming back to the slide, this was a case. You can see calcification in the upper incisor, central incisor, this whole part. The calcification includes, the calcification is present till the middle third of the root canal. This is other reason why CBCT should be taken. Next, you can see by the radiographs, you can also see the number of canals, the angulation of the tooth, the curvature of the root canal. Let's see in this case. What you can see a faint line which signifies a root canal and gradually the line is disappearing. That means either the canal is calcified or one canal is splitting into two canals. On careful observation, it was found that there is one root canal which is gradually splitting into two root canals. So, X-rays in this particular case, the X-ray helps us to assess the length of the root canal, the curvature of the canal, and number of the root canals. X-rays also helps us to assess initial penetration depth and the total penetration depth, where you should orient your burr, where and how you should orient your burr, until where you should go, the initial point and the final. So after pre-access analysis, the next step is remove all the defective restoration and caries. Do not work on teeth with defective restoration and caries. This is why, because once you have removed all the defective restoration and caries, you will generally have an idea what to do, how to do, and what your post-endodontic procedure should be. Whether you should give a posterior core, whether you should give a crown. Now, this tip is very useful in clinical practice. Sometimes what happens when the patient comes to you and he says, "Okay, fine, ho jayega. Kya karna hai isme?" You just have to excavate the caries, do RCU, and I'll give you a crown. By the time when the patient comes to you, after obturation, you see, oh my god, after removal of caries, you have to give a post also. So please remove all the caries in the beginning only to avoid all these things. Okay. And second most important factor is after removal of caries, you are also preventing micro leakage, which can occur through that caries part of tooth structure and the defective restoration, which can eventually lead to root canal failures. Now, once you have removed all the defective restoration and caries, the uh, the chamber is clear or the tooth is absolutely free of all these things. You have a mental idea of pulp chamber from the radiograph inside your mind. You select the tools, like you know what type of burr has to be used, you know whether ultrasonics have to be used or not, and you know where you should make an initial entry. So these are the burrs which are commonly used in endodontics, or these are the universal burrs. You don't need any other thing apart from them. You need a number 4 round burr. You need a safe end burr. I commonly use EndoZ by Dentsply. You need Ellen burr by Dentsply. It is available in the Endo Access kit, and you need ultrasonics. Irrespective of the case, these four instruments are absolutely, they make a complete set for endodontic access opening. Now, to begin, I'm going to start access opening in two phases to make you understand. One in anterior teeth and the other one in the posterior teeth. Let's come to the anterior teeth. I'm going to start with central incisors. The law of central incisor states that you divide the tooth into 9 equal columns. Okay, I'm repeating again. You divide the tooth into 9 equal columns. This line is incisor to the cingulum. You are not involving the cingulum because cingulum is the stress bearing area in central incisors. Okay, so you divide the tooth into 9 equal halves, and center point is the point where you make your initial penetration with a number 4 round burr. This law is universal for all the central incisor, irrespective. Okay, but you have to be careful and you have to do a complete pre-access analysis using radiographs. Like this, you take a number 4 round burr, make an entry, okay, at 45-degree angulation. Once you like this, now what happens? There is a layer of dentine which will obstruct the penetration of your burr. So here you are going to use a EndoZ burr. Why? Because this has a non-cutting end. And gradually, with in and out brushing motion, you're going to remove this part. Once you have removed this part, there is a smooth transition due to which your instruments will move easily till the apical 1/3 of the root. Okay, you can use EndoZ burr, you can use your gates, you can use your orifice openers also here. Like this, the lip of dentine has to be removed. Otherwise, you may leave some tissues here. This is your access opening. Okay. Now let's see this case. This patient reported to me just 10 days back, 10 15 days back, just a week before COVID-19 lockout. So he is a 45-year-old male and with no previous history of root canal. He reported with swelling in the buccal mucosa. The palatal mucosa was absolutely fine, and the swelling was fluctuant. It was tender on palpation. We did X-rays, but I was not convinced with the radiograph. So I asked the patient to get a three-dimensional CBCT done. In CBCT, what we saw calcification, and the calcification was present involving the pulp chamber and occlusion and coronal 1/3 of the root canal. So how did we go? A mental image of canal was made. I knew, okay, this is the starting point. I'm going to start my procedure at this point. Okay, and this is the image what I created in my mind. Then this point was the initial entry point for me. I used a number 4 round burr, made a ditch. No drop can be felt. Okay, no drop was felt because the chamber was completely calcified. Like this. Go inside. The diameter of this burr is around 1.35 millimeter. So at the max, you can go 1.5 mm inside with no drop. Okay. Once you are inside, you take your long neck burr and go towards the apex. All right, but you have to take radiographs in between. Otherwise, you may land up in perforations because every time you're not going to take CBCT. It's going to be radiograph every time to assess the position of the bar. And you know what happens with the radiograph? It gives a mesiodistal view. It never gives a buccolingual view. So you never know whether your burr is going buccally or lingually. It may perforate the tooth lingually also. So this is how your access should be. Now next case, this is a very interesting case. The patient was referred to me by one of my friend. Okay, and this patient had huge swelling. He is 34 years old and he wanted to have cosmetic treatment for discolored tooth in upper front region. This was the radiograph. So you can see incomplete obturation and a periapical radiolucency. The first diagnosis was okay, fine, let me do RIACT. Very simple case. Nothing to worry. I'm going to remove gutta-perca, place calcium hydroxide, keep the patient on heavy antibiotics, and I can, carry on with the treatment. This was the actual image. When we took CBCT, what happened? The tooth was perforated. And why does it happen? Because you take a round one, you penetrate, you do not know. You just go like this. But what should be there? Once you move your burr inside the canal, you feel a drop. As soon as you feel a drop, take the burr out, change the angulation, and then go inside the root canal towards the apex. So this angulation makes things a bit difficult to learn. This was the case with huge buccal swelling, and when the swelling was pressed, a lot of pus and discharge was coming out from the margins. This is next case. This patient was reported to me by my another dental surgeon friend, and the X-ray scan is very simple. So we thought, okay, this is a very simple case. We'll remove the gutta perca and we can carry on. The apical periodontal tissue seems also fine. But what happened when I removed I removed the temporal restoration? This was visible. Imagine this thing, lot of blood and gutta perca present inside the canal. The canal was actually located in the palatal direction, and filling was done in the buccal direction. This is the canal. So gutta perca was removed, canals were cleaned, and obturation was done using warm vertical compaction technique, and the perforation was repaired with MDA. You can see this point. This was the point of perforation, and this perforation site was repaired with MDA. So these are the common mishaps we do without understanding the angulation of the tooth when we do access opening. We do not take a preoperative radiograph in most of the cases. We see the case is very simple, anyone can do. So I request all of you to please make a pre-access analysis, study the radiograph, study the direction of the tooth, and then start with access. I'm going to show you a case of perforation which was made during access opening in case of maxillary lateral incisors. Again, maxillary laterals are very simple to do, but the things become clumsy when the canal is calcified. Okay, now coming to mandibular incisors. The protocol is very simple. Again, as I mentioned, you divide the tooth from the parietal side into two equal halves. Okay. So you divide the tooth into nine equal halves, and in this case, in mandibular incisors, instead of putting the burr directly in the center of the central compartment, place it slightly incisor. I'll tell you the reason why. This is your axis. The reason is simple because mandibular incisors are most commonly to have two canals. Okay, now let's see in this diagram. If this is my penetration point, okay, which lies in the central compartment, when I place my file, I'm going to miss the lingual canal. If I go slightly incisor, I'm going to access the lingual canal also. Okay, so the penetration point should be slightly incisor. It should be more towards the incisor edge as compared to your maxillary incisors. Maxillary canines can have single canal, or the curvatures can vary. Again, as I'm showing you the photograph, it's important to assess the curvature from the x-rays and then start with your axis opening. Yes, one more thing, please take angulated x-rays. Do not rely on single x-ray. Okay, angulated x-rays are must. So in maxillary canines, you can have elbow curvatures, you can have banana curvatures. The same diagram which I showed you previously, depending or using the laws of symmetry and orifice location, you should decide the number of orifices. Always people say we don't know how to locate orifices. We don't know how to decide how many orifices are there. Whether the tooth has one orifice or two orifices. This is the key principle. Law of symmetry 1 and 2 and law of orifice location. Alright? Mandibular canines, again, study the anatomy. You can see in the first diagram there is a very faint canal. That means there are two canals joining into one canal. Maxillary premolars, the rule is very simple. You make a line or you join a line or draw a line joining the buccal cusp tip and the parietal cusp tip, and in the center where the line bisects the central groove, make a ditch. Okay, make a ditch, do initial penetration, feel the drop, and using the same burr, move slightly buccally. Put your file, a 10 number file, and see where it's going. If the canal is located just below the central orifice, central fissure, that means there is only one canal. If the canal is located slightly off center, that means there are two canals. If the canal is located either mesially or distally to the central line, that means there are three canals. Okay. Now, next thing is maxillary first premolar. As I mentioned, the roof of the pulp chamber coincides with CEJ in 96% of maxillary first premolars. Please make a note. So you can do a pre-axis analysis here also. Use a periodontal probe, mark mark CEJ where CEJ is present, and at the same level of CEJ, the chamber the roof of the pulp chamber will be present. So you have to deroof that and How can you denote that? You can use your round bar and go beyond it. Okay. So coming to maxillary first premolars, as I mentioned, there are two canals, but sometimes there can be three canals also. If three canals are present, two canals are present on the buccal aspect. Maxillary second premolars, most commonly single canal with most commonly one root and two canals or one. There is a story behind this mandibular premolars. I had a nightmare. When I joined post graduation, my teachers gave me the tooth to start, and my first case was mandibular premolar, and I perforated mandibular premolar. Since then, it has an image in my mind. The simple reason being lingual, the cusp of mandibular premolars or the crown of mandibular premolars are tilted lingually and the root is straight. So if you're going straight, you may land up in perforation. Okay. So what do you have to do? You have to go straight perpendicular to the occlusal surface of the crown. Once you feel a drop, you remove the verb, place your file inside it, see the canal, assess the canal, then you can use your endo-Z burr to refine the to refine the dentinal wall in the pulse chamber and your orifice openers. So coming to first premolars, the initial point of entry should be here at 1/3 or 2/3 of the surface distance from the central groove, or in second premolars it should be near the central groove. All right. There's a lot of variation in mandibular first premolar and second premolar. First premolars have one canal in 74% of the cases, whereas second premolars have one canal in 97% of the cases. The presence of three canals is very, very rare. First premolars are said to be enigma to the endodontist. This is because they have variable anatomy. They have variable morphology of the pulse chamber and the pulse canal, radicular canals also, because of which it becomes difficult to negotiate and do root canal procedures. The curvatures may be different. There may be multiple canals. Yes. Now this is a tip. When you place your file inside the canal, okay, and the file is along the long axis of the tooth, that means there is only one canal. All right. Now, when you place your file inside the canal, and the canal is off center from the long axis of the tooth, that means there are two canals. And how can you assess? Okay, you place one file, 10 number file in the buccal canal, and you place 10 number file in the parietal canal or the lingual canal. If you move your buccal file, at times the parietal file will also move. Okay, that means both the canals are joining. So you can use the same thing to check whether your mesiobuccal canal and the mesiolingual canal in mandibular molars are fusing or not. You place one file in the mesiobuccal canal of the mandibular molar, you place other file in the mesiolingual canal of the mandibular molar, and you move the file slightly clockwise, anti-clockwise. When you move one file, the other file will also move. Okay, all right. So this is a very, very important tip. So as I mentioned, mandibular premolars can exhibit different anatomy. They can also have a C-shaped canal, which is extremely rare. One very important factor with your posteriors is that you should always de-occlude the tooth. Why? First, it decreases your working length throughout the procedures. So it becomes easy to perform endodontics with smaller files. You don't have to use 25 millimeters or 31 millimeters maximum in posteriors. All right. You can easily use your 21 millimeter file in the posteriors if you de-occlude the tooth. The task becomes easy. Secondly, it increases your visibility. It removes the overlying dentine and enhances your direct vision to the canals. You can see easily what is there at the floor of the pulse chamber. Third most important factor is that after deocclusion, there are lesser interferences during instrumentation because most of the overlying hindrances by the surrounding dentinal walls have been already removed by deocclusion. The cusp tips have been flattened. Let's see this case. Mandibular molars. What is coming to your mind? When I say okay fine, I'm going to start an access opening in this. I have to start endodontics in this. What are the important factors which come into my mind? One, where should I enter? Where is the first point of entry? Initial penetration of the burr. How deep should I go? And how wide should I make? Okay, these three factors make the basis of access opening in all the procedures. Let's see. The access cavity design in general depends upon two parameters. One is radiographic assessment and second is caries driven. So these two factors decide the location of the access opening, the depth of the access opening, the width of the access opening. Let's see this case. This point decides the width of the access opening. Okay? The access opening should be confined within the green lines below the red line. This point marks the penetration of the burr. And this is the floor, this is the roof of the pulp chamber which coincides with CEJ. So if I have assessed located the CEJ with my periodontal probe, I can use my straight burr, I can use my round burr, place it along the outer surface of the tube, see the depth, and use the burr at the same depth to penetrate. This is CEJ. So this is the roof of the pulp chamber. This is the line joining the cusp tips. This is the line passing through the floor of the pulp chamber. And this is a line passing through the furcation. This slide is very, very, very important. And this is a case which is commonly observed in teeth in mandibulars, molars, and maxillary molars without any changes because of aging, previous restorations, or deep caries. So the distance between the cusp tip and the roof of the pulp chamber is almost 6.5 millimeters in maxillary molars and mandibular molars. The distance between the pulp chamber roof and floor or the height of the pulp chamber is around 1.5 to 2 millimeters. The distance from the floor of the pulp chamber till the furcation is around 3 millimeters. So your safety margin is 6.5 plus 1.5 plus 3. That comes out to be 11. If you penetrate your burr more than 11 or 10, you're going to land up in trouble. You're going to pass through the furcation area. This is a burr which we commonly use for initial penetration. The length of the shaft is 6.50. Coming back, and here 6.50 is the distance between the cusp tip and the roof. So this is your initial penetration. The length of or the diameter of the burr is 1.35 mm. Now let's see. If I have to start my access opening in this case, how will I go? The distance is 8 to 8.5 millimeter. Let's say 8 millimeter. I'm going to place my burr. My burr will be 6.5 millimeters from the cusp till the roof plus 1 millimeters below or 0.5 millimeters below. That comes out to be 7 or 8. At 7 or 8 millimeters, I should feel a drop. If I'm not feeling a drop, there is something wrong. My angulation is not proper or the pulp chamber has calcification. So drop is felt at around 7 millimeters. You go, move 7 millimeters, take your burr out. Okay. Then put your burr. Do not go deep with the same burr. Rather move the burr laterally. And when you are moving laterally, it's always safe to use a non-end safe side cut, non-end cutting burr. Okay, end-to-edge burr can be used for that. So after penetration, the movement of the burr should be laterally. Do not enter beyond 8 millimeter of the burr length. Otherwise, what is going to happen? You are going to damage this zone. Again, this is the cusp tip. This is the roof of the pulp chamber. So the distance is around 6.5. If the tooth is calcified, the distance is more than 6.5 because the pulp chamber is filled with calcified tissues. So in this case, when you are placing a burr beyond 7 millimeters, no drop will be felt. Remember, this is the difference. No drop will be felt. So please do not push the burr more deep inside a molar which is calcified to get a drop. So I'm going to use the same laws for assessing and locating the canals when I'm doing an axis opening in posteriors. And laws of symmetry 1 and 2 and orifice location 1 and 2 helps me to find out the number of orifices and the location of the orifices. Coming to mandibular molar, the mandibular first molar is the most frequently endodontically involved treated tooth. It can have 3 canals, it can have 4 canals. Now the question comes, how will you decide how many canals are there? The distal has 1 canal or the distal has 2 canals? Same thing. 1, take X-rays. Pre-analysis using CEJ probing. And third point, orifice location laws and laws of symmetry 1 and 2. Now this is a case. Look at this. Incomplete obturation and the only 2 canals were obturated, mesial and distal, 1 GP is present. But during shaping or during refining of the axis opening, we saw 2 canals in the mesial and 1 canal in the distal root. So if your axis opening is right, your irrigation will be right and your disinfection will be good and finally obturation is perfect. That is all we want. You can also have a 3-rooted configuration, which is not common. Then you can also have middle mesial canals. Let's see this case. This is a 36-year-old patient and the patient got a composite restoration done 1 year back. He reported to us with severe pain, unbearable pain. Diagnosis of symptomatic irreversible pulpitis was made. We removed the composite restoration, located the canals. You can see 2 canals in the mesial side of the tooth. 1 canal is here. The second canal must be somewhere here. This I found by law of symmetry. You pass a line through the center of the tooth in the mesodistal direction and the other canal is present here. If there was only 1 canal, the canal must have been present below the line. This canal is off center, that means the other canal is also here. You look past this line, bisecting the line or dividing the line of interperpendicular distance. Okay? So your other canal is here. Look at this point. The second canal was located. Now when you are located the middle mesial canals, in this case, this slip of dentine joining the mesiobuccal and mesiolingual canal should always be removed. This part of dentine should always be removed if you are looking for your middle mesial canal. And how will you remove this? You always use your ultrasonics, never use your burr. So this is how you do. You can see here, middle mesial canal was located. Now there can be a C-shaped canal also. C-shaped canal can have variable anatomy. And how do you locate a C-shaped canal? C-shaped canal is most commonly seen in mandibular second molars. And how do you see? You put your file in the canal and you move your file in the you move your file from the mesiobuccal, mesiolingual, distolingual and distobuccal manner. And when you move your file along the orifices, the file moves in the shape of a C. Okay? So this is a case of C-shaped canal. We sent the patient for CBC to study the anatomy. This was a coronal section showing a complete C. This is middle section of the root or middle 1/3 of the root showing C in the form of semicolon. And this is C-shaped canal with C-shaped, orifice, but with 3 different portals of exit. three different portals of exit. Now you can have C-shaped canal in the form of semicolon also. This is a C-shaped canal in the form of semicolon. This is a very common mistake what we all do. We do access opening, we place a file, and what you can see, your file, there's a perforation. Your file is located between between the mesial and the distal roots. But this is a very common feature of C-shaped canal. It gives a false perception of perforation when the canals are absolutely fine. Now, there are some tips I would like to share with you when you're doing axis opening in mandibular molars. The shape of the axis is always decided by the number of canals, not by the operator. The shape is no only trapezoidal or quadrangular. There is nothing like triangular. I'll show you how. This was a case I did in my clinic 2 months back. You can see the shape. The shape of the axis opening is triangular. Two mesial canals and one distal canal. But there is one more canal. Okay, so the shape is quadrangular. What was my mistake? I made a triangular shape, but it should be a trapezoidal shape. Okay, it should be a trapezoidal shape. Now tip 2 is, when you are unable to locate the canals, you incline the bird towards the canal with the largest pulp horn. If there is one distal canal, the largest canal will be distal. So instead of inclining the bird towards mesial canal, you can incline the bird towards the distal canal in that case. First, you make distal opening, okay? Enlarge the distal part of the pulp chamber, and then you move the bird towards the mesial aspect. That is one motive. You see your X-rays, assess which is the largest canal. You make a ditch in the center, in the central fissure. You incline your bird towards the largest pulp horn, and then you move your bird in the opposite direction. Tip 3 is that if you are unable to locate the mesiobuccal canal, start penetrating the mesiobuccal cusp. Why? Because your mesiobuccal canal is located just below the mesiobuccal cusp tip. This was a case that came to me with a lot of pain and swelling, and this was the preoperative radiograph where root canal procedure was done 1 year back. When the canal was debrided of the restorative materials and of the cement, it was observed that two canals have been located. One, the mesolingual canal, it seems, and the other one is the um, distobuccal canal. So both GP were removed and perforation was seen involving the mesial wall. You can see here perforation, GPs were removed, and finally mesiobuccal canal was located just below the mesiobuccal cusp tip. So in this case, what did I do? I used my EndoZ burr, moved the burr slightly mesially, and when I moved the burr slightly mesially below penetrating or below the mesiobuccal cusp tip, I located the mesiobuccal canal. So the case was completed after MTA used as sealing material. Now coming to maxillary molars. Maxillary molars also have variable anatomy. MB2 is present in 90% or almost all the maxillary first molars. Maxillary second molars may have 3 canals or 2 canals also, very rarely. Now I'm going to share a few of my tips for locating MB2. First tip, you pass a line, okay, 2.5 millimeters from the mesial marginal ridge, and your MB2 is located on that line. So if you want to locate your MB2 canal, you should remove the wall of the axis cavity more towards the mesial marginal ridge. Okay, that's one tip. Second tip says that if you pass a line or if you draw a line passing through mesiobuccal canal and the palatal canal, the mesiobuccal 2 canal is located about 10 degrees from that line. There is a difference of 10 degrees at 2 millimeters distance. Now tip 3 says this is a rule of 90 degrees. you pass a line joining the mesiobuccal canal and the palatal canal, and other line passing through the distobuccal canal, which intersects at this point. Okay, at the point of intersection, you draw a semicircle, semicircle with 1 millimeter radius. And this point oftenly marks the location of MB2 canal. So these are the three tips which are commonly used to locate MB2 canals in most of the cases. I repeat, in most of the cases, but not in all cases. Every tooth has a different anatomy. Keep that in mind. Okay, you must have treated 100 patients or 500 patients, but every tooth has a different anatomy. And these rules and these laws are applicable but subjected to previous restorations, the process of aging, calcification, or any other previous treatment or history of the patient. Now coming to a new term known as ninja axis opening. Now let's see what is ninja axis opening. The basis of ninja axis opening depends upon two factors. The principle of modern axis opening was given by Dr. Clark and Fermi. They investigated, I think, a 10-year series of X-rays, and after investigating all the X-rays, they said that two factors are responsible for success of endodontically treated teeth. One is pericervical dentin and soffit. And these two factors form the basis of modern axis opening, which is known as ultra-conservative or ninja axis opening. Now let's see what are these two factors. One factor is pericervical dentin. Pericervical dentin is nothing but it is a dentin which is present 2 millimeters above this part and 2 millimeters below the apical crest. Okay, this is your apical crest. So the dentin which is present 4 millimeters above and 4 millimeters below. This is your pericervical dentin. And this pericervical dentin is responsible for resistance to fracture. If you leave this amount of dentin, your teeth will be resistant to fracture. Second factor is soffit. Soffit is nothing but a small piece of pulp chamber roof. This is soffit. Pulp chamber roof entire coronal part of the pulp chamber. It prevents collateral damage to the walls. Okay, so if your axis opening has these two principles, it has more longevity and it is more subjected to masticatory forces. So these are some of the ninja axis openings. Now there were two interesting studies that were done comparing. First is the traditional axis opening, second is your conservative, and third is your ultra conservative or ninja axis opening. Now, these three teeth were studied using FE analysis, and what they studied? They studied the fracture resistance of the teeth. Why did they study fracture resistance of the teeth? Because the most common problem of endodontically treated teeth is that they fracture without prosthesis. Okay, so the authors they used three type of cavity preparation and subjected them to the same loading, and they finally evaluated or they concluded in their study that teeth with traditional axis opening they had maximum chances of fracture, and teeth with ninja axis opening they have minimum chances of fracture. Okay, so in terms of fracture resistance, ninja axis opening is the best. Ninja axis opening or ultra conservative followed by conservative and then the traditional ones. Second, in the second part of the study, analysis was done and it was found that ninja axis or ultra conservative axis produced maximum chances of iatrogenic errors during shaping as compared to your traditional axis. So there are different, as I mentioned, there are two different types of axis. You have traditional axis and you have conservative axis. Conservative axis means you are developing soffit, you are preserving PCD, pericervical dentin, and thereby you are actually increasing the longevity of the tooth by decreasing the fracture loads on the tooth. Okay, or making the tooth more susceptible to the same fracture loads. But the difference is that in traditional, you have straight line axis. You do not have straight line axis in conservative axis opening. One factor. Second, as we all know, that 95% of people are not using dental scopes, dental microscopes. Okay, so please do not try to do ninja axis opening or ultra conservative axis opening when you are not using a dental microscope, operating microscopes. Ninja axis openings are best when done under dental microscopes because the axis is limited. Imagine if the axis is limited, you cannot, if you are using a dental operating microscope, then you go for conservative axis. Third most important factor is disinfection. Disinfection with traditional axis opening is anytime better than your conservative axis opening. If you are using syringe activations, okay, if you are using devices like sonic and ultrasonics, then conservative is also, traditional gives a straight line axis. Conservative does not depend upon straight line axis. It is a concept of minimal invasive dentistry, minimal invasive endodontics. Traditionals help you to visualize all the root canals. Conservative will not help you to visualize all the root canals. Rather, you have to use a dental operating microscope, tilt the mirror at every angle, and see the location of the canal. So, the basic principle is perseverance or saving the coronal tooth structure. Traditional, because it is wide, it provides a straight line axis, it produces less strain on the instrument with consistent working length. Okay, strain on the instruments is less. This is in contrast to conservative, where you are creating, when you're developing more strains on the instruments. Okay, traditional is more susceptible to fracture, conservative is very less susceptible to fracture. In traditional, you have compromised the tooth structure. In conservative, you are saving the tooth structure. So the next principle is guided endodontics. This is my favorite subject. Why guided? Because guided is in between traditional and uh, ultra conservative. Okay. The first case was done in the year 2015. There was a case of calcified canal. And how does it work? You take a CBCT data, then transfer the CBCT images in STL file to your 3D printers. By 3D printers, you can create a jig. Okay. This jig has holes. And when you place your file through the jig on the tooth, your drilling burr, when placed inside the hole, will directly lead you to the calcified chamber. Like this was a case, the calcified canal present here. Okay, they studied the angulation. Uh, jig was created virtually. This is a jig that was created by 3D printing. You can see a bar, a piece of metal inside the jigs. A lot of people are using the jig these days, but please, I would suggest you do not use a jig without this barrel of metal, because what will happen if you place this jig on the tooth and you try to do axis opening? As soon as you place your burr, the burr will abrade the surface of this jig. Once the surface is abraded, your burr may wobble, your file may wobble, which may again change the direction of your axis. So this is how your jigs are placed. Two important requirements of jig. First, a barrel, a piece of metal should be placed inside the jig. Second, the jig should be completely stabilized. It should not be moving. This is how your axis can be done in calcified teeth. And even we did a case study on, we did a research with our team, and we designed a method by which you can do guided endodontics. This can be done at any engineering center. If you have any doubts, you can write to us. A three-dimensional image of the tooth, a virtual image of the tooth was created. The jig was initially designed virtually. Location of the burr was chosen, and we decided a method to locate the burr or to create straight line axis with the jig. That was a study. This was my team, and fortunately, I was awarded the Women Research Award also for my this research and other researches related to MATLAB projects in endodontics. The prize was awarded very recently on 15th of February. So, concluding the presentation, if somebody asks me what is endodontic access cavity, I would say that an access which is prepared after thorough pre-access analysis, which is radiographic and clinical, after complete removal of entire faulty restoration and existing caries, permitting straight line access to the canals and prepared with minimal tooth loss, is the preferred access cavity, irrespective of traditional, conservative, or ultra conservative or guide. Thank you so much. This is my number and this is my email ID. I'm sharing my WhatsApp number also. If you have any doubts related to any part of the seminar, you are free to contact me. Yes, now I conclude my presentation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. That was absolutely a great presentation, isn't it? The viewers, all of you all who are watching it right now on sensodynewebinar.com, or you are watching it on Facebook, you are watching the parties which are hosted by different dentists. It was fantastic. I think
Okay. Okay. Thank you, participants. If you have any questions, you can please send to us. I just want to share a few tips with you. I know there are a lot of people attending the seminars. There are interns, there are graduates, there are postgraduates, there are dental surgeons, there are postgraduate doctors, there are doctors from different specialty who are non-endodontists. But this is my request to all the non-endodontic surgeons or all the non-endodontist friends out there. See, in Access Opening, please read a common textbook. You can read textbook by Dr. Arnold Castellucci and then follow the same principles. Do 5 extracted teeth following the same principles, and ultimately you can tackle any case. Take for beginners, I would suggest that take 2 central incisors, mark 9 points, make 9 compartments, and then start your preparation. For lower incisors, I would say that make 9 points and start your axis more towards the incisor edge. And similarly, for molars and premolars, I would suggest you to take 2 cases, mark CEJ using your periodontal probe, and take radiograph, and then you do. Once you have done following these principles, there you may find access opening very easy.
Ma'am, give us a minute. We are taking the questions and giving back to you. And meanwhile, we are trying to connect Ajay sir as well. So if you want to discuss
Yes.
something till that time, you can continue.
There is a common debate which is going on, which is the best. Okay, people prefer ninja access, people prefer conservative, they prefer traditional, and some prefer guided endodontics. But according to me, guided is best, because guided helps you to locate the canals. It doesn't damage the surrounding tooth structure. But there are two difficulties or two problems with guided face till now. One, in guided access with molars, okay, is very difficult, because you imagine a stent which has MB1, MB2, distal buccal, and palatal. Now, if you're preparing a stent for mandibular molars or maxillary molars, the orifices will be close to each other. So, what is going to happen when you start drilling? Two orifices will overlap. In that case, you may wobble the burr, or you may land up wobbling the file also, your shaping instruments also. because of which the accuracy will be lost. All right. The second problem with guided is that you should always take CBCT. Guided cannot be done on radiographs. CBCT is not indicated at all in routine endodontics. So that makes guided endodontics a different chapter overall. All right. Now, if you are comparing traditional with conservative or with ultra conservative, my view is that it is a cavity in which straight line axis is achieved after thorough pre-axis analysis and without damaging or without compromising most of the tooth structure. I follow two principles in my routine practice. First, straight line axis. Straight line axis means direct access to the initial curvature of the canal or apical one third. And second principle is that I have to save as much as tooth structure as possible. In maxillary molars, I'm going to save the oblique ridge. In mandibular molars, I have to save the central region and the mesial margin.